Every team, every topic, everywhere. This is Believe.
Welcome back to the show. Welcome back to Raising Howl. Yeah, thanks for including us into your podcast lineup. I know that there's plenty you can listen to. Maybe not a whole lot that deal with the Red Wolves. There are a couple. There's more every day. I might not be your favorite, and that's okay. It's okay. I'm not here to be your favorite. I'm just here to call it how I see it. Not necessarily how it is, but to call it how I see it. And I wrote something on Monday. Check it out on Hellraiser. Hellraiser.com. It's an ode to Arkansas State fans and our let's wait and see energy that we project every game. I don't know if you remember last November. Seems like an ice age ago, but we played UA Little Rock. It's that revenge game, that game that I know Coach Hudge wanted to win. And there was a nice crowd. It was more than 5,000 guys, 5,000 fans out there. Looked good on TV. It looked good in person. There were also an unusual number of media members in attendance. Yeah, you know, when I sit at the media table, the media table isn't what you see on the sidelines. You see that middle section in the sidelines, and those are all like radio guys. Those are SIDs. Those are officials. That's not like the rank and file media. We get seated kind of up in the corner. It's not a bad seat, but it's just a few rows of tables, some outlets to plug our computers in, and it's nothing fancy at all. They rope it off for us, and that's nice. But yeah, there were more people from the media in attendance. Guys I hadn't seen before. I thought that was pretty cool. Including was a young man from Memphis. I forget his name. I forget where he's from, but he said he represented the region. But I got the feeling that he covered a lot of Tiger sports. He's kind of used to what he saw with the Tigers. Tigers, it's a bigger city. There's a bigger fan base. They play their games at the FedEx Forum, which is where the Memphis Grizzlies play. So it's not on campus. It's sort of a city team. And if you go to a Memphis Grizzlies game, Memphis Tigers game, it's usually a pretty crowded affair. There's a lot of colorful characters there. Got a good music scene. They've got their band in force. They've got probably the biggest cheer squad I've ever seen. But yeah, it's a production. So during the A-State UA Little Rock game, about midway through the first half, the game was close. That game didn't really separate itself until about halfway through the second half. Red Wolves ended up winning by double digits. But this young man from Memphis, he kind of turns to me and says, "Are Red Wolves games always this quiet?" Yeah, I kind of laughed like I did just now and said, yeah, it's kind of how it is. It's kind of a unique quality of Arkansas State fandom, our reserve. We tend to marshal our emotions for big plays. But between those plays and outbursts of emotion, there's a layer of anxiety, that we have earned by too many heartaches, right? We've seen too many blown leads, too many fumbles in the red zone, too many men stranded in scoring position. I mean, yeah, we're Red Wolves fans. I'm not saying that our hardships are any worse than any other fan base's hardships, but we have obstacles to overcome. And as a fan, it just makes it hard. We don't have a bunch of money for brand new facilities. We don't have a bunch of money to buy a bunch of 4-star recruits. We just don't have that. But we have expectations as Red Wolves fans. We have expectations. We also have reservations. We're in perpetual wait and see, arms crossed mode. Yeah. We're waiting. We're seeing. We're often told this is the year, guys. This is the year. Not just for basketball. This is the year of football. This is the year of baseball. This is the year of bowling. All right. We'll just wait and see. People are showing up for this basketball team. 5,600 yesterday, or I'm sorry, on Saturday. It's been a little bit. That was a good crowd. Kind of. We weren't quiet. I'm not going to say we're a quiet crowd. I call it the A-State murmur, though. It's sort of this electric energy that permeates throughout the fan base. The energy of anxiety. Are we going to blow this game? And sure, I thought Georgia State was going to provide a bigger challenge. I had this idea that maybe Georgia State, they were kind of, I don't know, gelling. They have all these transferred guys. All of them seem to have pretty good resumes. No, they weren't much of a challenge. But we had plenty to cheer for, right? But we just kind of had to wait, right? We kind of had to see the team sort of start rolling, see a few three-pointers made, see a couple dunks. Yeah. And then we let loose a little bit. Yeah, we get off our hands. We exhale a little bit. When the lead gets up to about 20, we're like, okay, I think we're safe. Woo! So for my young Memphis colleague, he probably found the A-State murmur to be a little unsettling, but sorry, bruh. That's our vibe. You got to deal with it. BetOnline continues to be the world's most trusted betting platform and your number one source for online betting in 2025. Whether you're a seasoned fan like myself or a first-time bettor, BetOnline is your ultimate game day companion with the largest selection of odds on everything from football, the NBA, college basketball, to the NHL and UFC. BetOnline is the number one sports betting source for the whole new year. From touchdowns to three-pointers and hat tricks, BetOnline has you covered on every game, every play, and every win. BetOnline, the game starts here. So I want to introduce my guest. Yeah, I don't have a lot of guests. Although I had a guest last time. It's Kara Ritchie. She was great. We got through about a quarter of the podcast before we realized that I had pressed record, but we didn't make that mistake this time. So you're getting the raw information. You're not getting a retread here. My guest, he's the unofficial third-party voice of Arkansas State athletics, and really for all sports in Northeast Arkansas. He's been doing this since about 2009. He took a little break, came back. I'm guessing because he really missed Northeast Arkansas. I want to welcome
I needed a job. I needed a job. So I was like, hey, there's an opportunity to come back. I'm like, sure, when can I sign up?
I'm begging you to come back. I want you all to welcome to the show, KAIT, Channel 8 Sports Director Chris Hutchinson, to the show for the first time. Welcome to the show, Chris.
I mean, this is a lot of pressure being like a handful of guests so far. So
I know.
Let's just make sure I don't say anything bad so I could come back next time, whenever that is.
You're following Kara Ritchie, and she's kind of a stats head.
That's ridiculously big shoes. That's ridiculously like hard shoes to fill in. Like I would say she's like the queen of. I would say the queen of not just the A-State beat. I would say the queen of the Sun Belt beat, just because she's been at the game for so many years. So I'm fortunate to call her a friend in this wildly cutthroat, kind of crazy industry. So she's one of a few friends I got in the industry. So I'm just happy. It's kind of cool to be on the same beat with her.
Here's the kind of cool thing about that too, is if you put our heads together, my head and your head, we would still not have the same encyclopedic knowledge of A-State sports like she has.
There's a lot of times I'm like looking up stats, and honestly now it's like the competitor in me. It's like, can I find this stat before Kara does? And there's a good chance she already has it. And so I'm just kind of playing catch up. Nothing wrong with that whatsoever. It's like, hey, it's like at the end of the day, we're all after the same, I guess, big wheel of cheese, so to speak. So it's like, hey, we're all kind of going after the same things, but it's like different ways we kind of approach it. I mean, good gracious, she's got like a 2-3 hour show she's got to fill every day. I only got 3 to 4 minutes, so I will gladly be in the latter situation because that's next to impossible.
I like that we're all cutting from the same wheel of cheese. This will be a thin slice. It won't be the hefty slice of cheese that we can get from Kara or even from your coverage on KAIT. Chris, I want to talk a little bit about Arkansas State and its relationship with the media. You covered ASU and Northeast Arkansas sports for a very long time. I think off screen I called you the dean of NEA sports media because you've been around so long, because you're probably one of the most recognizable guys in Northeast Arkansas. Earlier in the show, you weren't around to hear it. I was talking about Northeast Arkansas fans, particularly Arkansas State fans, how they can be kind of reserved, how they have sort of a let's wait and see approach to A-State sports. How would you describe Northeast Arkansas sports fans in general? You've probably met more than I could ever count.
I've embraced it because I will say this sometimes to people, and they'll look at me weird, like, what are you saying? I say the island of Northeast Arkansas. Yes, we're in a landlocked kind of state, but you got to understand with just the ecosystem of the state. Granted, it took me a couple years to figure this out. When I first moved here in 2009, I was like, kind of feels like Jonesboro and this Northeast Arkansas area is kind of cut off from the rest of the state. Yeah. Like in terms of the ecosystem of, Fayetteville media and Little Rock media, where with the exception of Arkansas State, the only time you really see Arkansas, like Northeast Arkansas, essentially maybe cross-pollinate with the rest of the state is the high school state basketball tournament when folks get to Hot Springs and they're wondering, who is so-and-so school? Who is the school? And they realize it's a high school from Northeast Arkansas that outdraws them 2-1. But then it kind of goes back into A-State where when I first moved here, mind you, when I first moved here in 2009, I had already heard of Arkansas State because of Sunbelt, because I'm a college football degenerate. I watched everybody. Didn't really care what conference it was. So I had a little bit remote of a knowledge of Arkansas State when I moved up here. But then when I came here and then kind of figure out the lay of the land and everything like that, what was so fascinating was not just the wait and see approach, which to some people you're like, okay, you should be hyped up about this. But then you have the flip side of this is doom is around the corner, where it's like there's been so many years they've gotten so so many sports. You could just name every single scenario, even football, the latter days of the Steve Roberts days where they got agonizingly close of not just going to bowl games, but winning Sun Belt championships, doom around the corner. Something would happen, an injury, a random backup quarterback out of nowhere dropping 250 on you. Like there's been doom around the corner. So it's a fan base that's been fascinating to get to know over the years because it's unlike any fan base I've had to deal with. I think the closest I would compare them to, kind of similar to Mississippi State a little bit when I was down in Mississippi, where you had a wait and see approach. But then there's little differences here and there. I would honestly compare it to kind of like a Southern Miss more than a Mississippi State, where it's like, okay, it is a fiercely proud fan base. Is it the biggest fan base in the world? No. But you've got some of the most diehard fans imaginable They may just show their fandom in different ways.
Yeah, I like
you. There's so many different ways to kind of go about it, and just with the A-State fan base, it's a mixture of wait and see, and is there doom around the corner? Thankfully, we're in a time frame right now where it's the former, not the latter, because this is kind of what it's already shaping up to kind of be like the second kind of, I guess, glory run that I've had the chance to cover with A-State, where it's a mishmash of the 2010s football kind of taking off. You had the first couple years of John Brady where the team like really turned the corner and had a chance to go, make a run in the Sun Belt tournament. Baseball was kind of turning things around. So it's like the vibes are kind of good across the board with all the sports, so to speak.
Yeah, I want to talk about Hodgson in a minute. In fact, I got a block I want to talk about. But you said something about you kind of compared it to Mississippi State. You pulled around to Ole Miss, but I think Mississippi State might be the more apt in terms of Mississippi State. I don't know Mississippi State. My wife is an Ole Miss grad, so she knows a little bit about Mississippi State. But that seems to be a more blue-collar fan base, more of a, not rural, I don't want to say it's country fan base, but it is.
It kind of is.
I don't want to put words in the mouth of Mississippi State.
It kind of is in the regards of Starkville is legit in the middle of nowhere. And it's kind of similar to how Jonesboro, it's like, yes, a whole lot of rural farmland. And then you have this jewel of Northeast Arkansas like sprout up in Jonesboro. So there's kind of similarities there. Obviously, there's some big time differences there, but it's like obviously Mississippi State baseball got the College World Series, had all the success in the world. But in terms of fan base vibe and how it interacts with the rest of the state, it's similar. Like Arkansas State, I would say similar to what Southern Miss had to deal with being in the state of Mississippi, where it's like, okay, you have an SEC school getting 99% of the oxygen in terms of college media. I wouldn't say 99. That's kind of harsh. I would say like 90%.
Yeah. Then
you have the other 10%, and it's like literally fighting, scratching, and clawing for survival. Obviously, A-State chief like top of the map just because of what they won. They've been at it a whole lot longer than the rest of the other colleges in the state. But then two, it's this weird perception battle that they've had to deal with for so long. It's like Arkansas takes up so much of the oxygen, and then it's like A-State. You have this it's the bizarro version of what Dabo Swinney has said, little old Clemson.
Yeah.
It's a bizarro version of that. It's like a little old A-State, but it's like, no, it's a great university without Arkansas State. Northeast Arkansas is just a bunch of farmland. I've honestly said that. That's how important A-State is to this region of Northeast Arkansas, because it's such a driver, and not just obviously things sports-wise. Having a Division I school in this kind of corner is fantastic, but then it just ecosystem. It trickles into everything else. Education, business, infrastructure, just everything else is like how important A-State is to the region. And so when I moved here and kind of figured out, okay, what's the one thing I can do to hang my hat on and kind of set myself apart from everybody else? It's like, okay, you have 9/10 of the media ecosystem in the state covering the Razorbacks. And I was like, what if I just go all in? I'll just tell you, like, I kind of like cribbed a lot of stuff from a bunch of different places that I saw. And I'm like, granted, my background, it came from the Southeastern Conference, because where I'm from in Columbus, Georgia, my hometown, I have 3 SEC fan bases in one city. It's kind of a bizarro melting pot. You have Georgia fans and Alabama fans and Auburn fans in one place, yet somehow the city is still standing. Don't ask how. It just happens that way. Fall's magical down there. Basketball rolls around. It's like, and nobody really cares. But when I moved here, I figured out, I was like, I've got a Division I school in town. Why don't I treat them like an SEC school and just go overboard in coverage and see what happens?
And what happened?
And I'm still here, so I guess I'm good at my job. But
people like
it was once I kind of, it took me 6 months to a year to figure out like how I'm going to go about this, where that first year I was here, 2009, it was awful. I made a lot of mistakes that I sure wouldn't make now, but then I figured out, thanks to a lot of people at A-State kind of behind the scenes that you almost never see on camera, aka Jerry Scott and the A-State SID crew.
We love those guys.
A lot of them kind of figured out what I was trying to do, and they kind of really helped me and so many coaches, so many players over the years. And so it kind of trickled down to when I moved back here, it's like, okay, I can learn from the mistakes I made the first time around and kind of, I wouldn't say perfect it. It's just, okay, we're going to hang our hat on all things A-State, where I want to be the one daily consistent source of A-State news, because you kind of see it. There's not a lot of places that do that.
Well, okay, I've been very critical of how statewide media covers Arkansas State, and I'm not really going to go too deep into that. But you're kind of the standard bearer for covering university athletics, and that's great. But quite frankly, there is a pretty solid media community in Northeast Arkansas covering Arkansas State. Do you guys kind of think of yourselves as belonging to an exclusive fraternity of journalists, a sort of niche group of guys that have come together and is covering this university?
I feel like we're the renegades of the natural state just because what we cover is so just anathema to everyone else, where it's like, okay, Hogs High School. It's like A-State High School. We're like, oh, there's another. It's like you sometimes get this look from people. They're like, oh, there's another major Division I school in the state of Arkansas. I'm like,
it can be new.
Yeah, they're in the EA. They're in EA College Football 25. They didn't they don't have everybody in there. They're one of only 130 some odd schools. It's like, hey, being that's a little bit different, but it's something I've noticed in my travels in so many years. It's like thankfully, Sun Belt Conference in general, we're in a fortunate spot because it's the one of the few mid-major conferences where you can pretty much point out every single school in that league, and you've got a local media source there that really hangs their hat on covering that team. So, give you a couple examples. I mean,
sure.
WDAM, Hattiesburg, they cover Southern Miss like we cover A-State. WHSV, Harrisonburg, they cover James Madison, kind of like how we cover A-State, and you can kind of go on. And it's just, we're in a rare spot because, hey, like I said, there's only 130 odd of these spots where it's like, you could cover a Division I school, and if you do it right, you can have essentially day-to-day coverage of a Division I school. I mean, that's kind of a pretty cool thing to have.
This wasn't a question I had on my bingo list. So I'm going to ask you anyway. You've seen a lot of head football coaches come through Arkansas State. I imagine starting with Steve Roberts. Who was the most fun to interview? And who wasn't?
The most fun to interview,
or at least who was the easiest to interview? Some guys, they sit down, they're upfront with everything. Some guys are kind of reserved and would rather not tell you a thing. Who's the best guy in that reserve? Not the ones, but the best guy.
It's kind of interesting because they're each different, just how they approach things. Like, Roberts was very old school, but it made sense why he did it just because of how he was kind of brought up in the coaching industry and things like that. Freeze was fascinating because he was the young, ridiculously hungry head coach trying to scratch and claw. Gus Malzahn the same way. My answer would be Gus, because that year I had to cover was one of the hardest media years we ever had to cover, because Gus's approach coming from the SEC was to close everything. So he was one of the few coaches where you had to make the most out of every media interaction you had, where it's like, okay, we're not wasting time with bad, goofy, yes, I got a ridiculously bizarre sense of humor, but I'm like, I don't know how much media time I'm going to have, so I've got to make the most out of every circumstance. I want to say, I was like, that was the bizarre year. This was 2012. I did color commentary for the spring game because I was one of the few people that went to practice. It was one of the weirdest experiences ever. Where, spring, this is the day of the spring game. Do you have a camera? No, I am in the press box.
That was the game that Gus Malzahn wanted 10,000 people. It didn't quite work out.
Didn't quite get there, but bless him, he tried. But what was so great about that was that really sharpened the sword, so to speak, where it's like, okay, I'm not going to waste time. I'm going to try to be not direct where I'm harsh, but like I'm going to keep this simple and keep it to the point. Like I'd say the two coaches in the whole time I've covered A-State that I learned the most from were Gus Malzahn and John Brady. Folks may look at me and be like, yeah, Brady? Why'd you learn a lot from him?
I'm sure
that man did not waste time. Brady was fascinating to cover because he gave me this lesson a long, long time ago, and it was more about listening and paying attention. Because granted, that time, I'm literally 2-3 years in the industry where I'm like trying to figure out what the heck I'm going to do. John Brady said, I'm going to try my best John Brady impersonation because he's still one of my favorites. Man, one of my biggest pet peeves was when I did an opening statement and the first question I had was in the opening statement that I already just said. And I put 2 and 2 together immediately. I'm like, okay, got you. Like,
don't do that.
Try to make sure to pay more attention, questions and stuff like that, and just try to be more observant. So I always tell people
when he would say that, when he would say that, would his face get redder and redder and redder, and
he would just get more annoyed. And at first I was like, why is he doing this? And then it took a little bit of time for me to figure it out. I was like, oh, because he'd gone through much of the SEC where he kept getting asked the same question over and over and over again. I was like, yeah, I could kind of see why you get annoyed, agitated by that. So I kind of see that. So
I can see some parallels too. I can see some parallels too with that with Butch Jones, in that he comes from the SEC and now he feels like he has to be scripted in some ways. You know, he says the same anecdotes a lot. Like he'll pick a theme for the year and stick with that theme. And then once you get away from it, it works great.
It's crazy because to a lot of people who are like, he says the same things. I was like, yes and no. He says a lot of the same things because it still matters in college football. Yeah. It still works. As crazy as this sounds, it's 2025, and a lot of lessons that he's been talking about for like the last 10, 15 years still apply. Hey, the team that makes the fewest mistakes wins the game. Hey, don't turn the football over. Hey, win the middle 8. You're probably going to win a lot of games. Hey, we're going to have elite special teams.
Yeah,
11 yes, it sounds ridiculous. It's at 1 for 11. I'm like, yeah, because they still work. Yes, it sounds cliche, but after a lot of times, hey, cliche becomes canon. There's a reason a lot of these cliches, they're still, that we keep hearing about from a long, long time ago, still work now. So he's been fascinating to cover so far, where year one, granted, he was fresh off of Tennessee and how that ended. And so I think that first year, he was literally trying to get to know us to figure out like, okay, how's this media ecosystem here compared to Knoxville? And it's like, yeah, we're like the most ridiculously chill media beat ever, where we're just here to cover the team.
Well, remember,
we ain't out here we're just here to cover the team and do the best we can every day.
Remember the knock on him when he came here was, well, there's some other knocks, but the knock was media wise was he's just not very good with the media, and he doesn't, he gets kind of cranky with the media. And I've never experienced that at all, Chris. He's always been willing. He remembers who I am. We sit down, we talk. He gives me everything I want, and I think he's been great. I don't know if you've had the same experience.
Pretty like it's been great covering him so far. Where he's pretty much been. Obviously, not all coaches are all the way open book, but it's like as open as you could probably get to a Division I coach. It's like he's been pretty great with his time, access, and things like that. So I'm never going to be one of these types that's ever going to complain about access, because it's like, hey, like I'm just happy for whatever. I'm going to maximize what I get and just try to make the best shows out of it and make the best. I guess I could say we can make the best content out of that, because that's the buzz term we have to say now. It's like when I started in this business 2009-ish. It's like, they go over and say content, but it's like, hey, content's
I say it all the time.
Rule of the land. I think the thing was when Butch came here was just trying to figure out to trust the media, I guess, if that is a weird way to say it that way. It's like, okay, how are these folks involved? Are they all out to get me like it seemed like everybody was in Knoxville? And a lot of the times I'm like, no, because we're in such a unique media environment in the city of Jonesboro where it's like, yeah, you essentially have a TV station, a radio station, and a newspaper, and you did several digital sites, and that's essentially it in terms of the 100% of the Arkansas State coverage. So I think that first year, once you've kind of figured out our get down and figure out, oh, okay, they're not all crazy people. We just look like we're crazy. Yeah, we're just out here to cover the team and just try to learn. That's about it.
All right, switching gears just a little bit, Hudge. You've seen a lot a shitload, an ass ton of A-State basketball since your time coming here, since 2009. You've gone through the John Brady era, who you've just confessed was one of your favorite guys. You've been through the Mike Bellotto era, which actually I liked Mike Bellotto as a guy.
I did too. He just didn't the wins weren't there. You understood okay, there was a point of no return.
Yeah,
change and obviously it's the most best case scenario. I'd say the best case scenario for a coaching change for Arkansas State since Freeze.
No, I could see
across
that.
all the sports. If you think of okay, when the change happened, who they hired, and what's just happened in the meantime, it reminds me a lot of that where, Brian Hodson and his coaching staff are solely, and a whole lot of talented players that they've been able to recruit. This is essentially the rebirth of Red Wolves basketball, where there's an actual energy and buzz around the program. The last time you had that was that Grant McCaslin year, but that was more of a one-hit wonder because the second he left, everything kind of went kind of down again. We saw inklings of this.
I forgot about Grant McCaslin.
One or two of the John Brady years where one of my favorite games still that I remember covering, and this is across all A-State sports, was the bizarro 4 overtime game with Little Rock in the Sun Belt tournament where A-State won the game and literally had no gas in the tank for the next day. But the fact they went through the 4 overtime game, so much so, it was the lead story on Sports Center that night, which it's weird to tell people now in 2024. They're like, yeah, that happened 2014. That was kind of a big thing to kind of be the lead. Kind of is now, obviously, with the SVP thing. But to tell somebody now, they're like, hey, they led Sports Center. They're like,
yeah.
Okay.
When we beat Memphis.
But back then it was a really cool deal. Yeah. But, this team, this is easily the best top to bottom team in terms of A-State basketball that I've covered. If you wanted it's not even close. And that's weird to say that.
Well, let me swing this back to the coaches then, because we talked about Brady. We talked about Coach McCaslin, who, for some reason, I
didn't cover, but I remembered that year because I was just
you weren't there for that.
This is like a 20-win A-State team. I'm like, what is going on? And I read up more on it when I came back, and I was like, oh, this is what happened. And just kind of reading how it got from point A to point B and C and D and E.
Yeah, it's a different vibe now. But what do you think? What is it about Brian Hodgson, just himself, that separates him from the rest of these coaches, and why is he successful at Arkansas State? Or some of these other guys just couldn't quite get there.
He's the Voltron.
Okay. Wow.
Of ridiculously talented basketball coach.
All right.
Ridiculously hungry recruiter.
Mm-hmm.
Excellent marketer.
Sure.
And then having the intangibles to bring everyone together. I know there's 5 to form Voltron, but it's like the 5th, obviously, is having a style of play that people want to see. Where you've got so many times in college basketball, and I can tell you over the years, I've seen a lot of bad basketball. A lot of teams, we're going to play half-court defense. We're going to scratch and claw 60 to 55 win, and we're going to do this over and over and over again. The second Brian Hodgson showed up, and the first thing he said in his press conference is, we're going to play a style like NBA basketball. We're going to have high-percentage 2-point shots and a whole bunch of threes. Not one time did he say the word mid-range jumper, which I like mid-range jumpers just because I'm used to 90s NBA, but having that style of play and him understanding, him coming here and kind of immediately latching on and getting it, which that is a skill not a lot of coaches have had that have come here. You can probably put it on one hand who have figured out a way to latch onto the fan base immediately, play a style of play that people want to see, and then market in a sense to literally get people to come to games. I'm having to tell people, I told Logan Whaley this, and I was telling Charles, I'm like, Charles McCary now, I'm like, there's 5,000 people here, and it's a legit 5,000. We're not having to count. We're not having to fudge the numbers. We're not having to do a 2-for-1 special and say, oh, that person counts as 2. This is a legitimate 5,000 people in the seats. And I told them, I'm like, I've not seen this since the early Brady years when it was 4,000 or 5,000. for only the Little Rock game. This wasn't
Yeah.
just, okay, 5,000 for some random Sunbelt opponent. No offense to Sunbelt. Y'all just understand the nomenclature I'm trying to use.
I get it.
5,000 for a random Sunbelt opponent. When Georgia State came and it's a Saturday afternoon and it's really cold and people showed up, and it's like, it's not normal. It hasn't happened in a very long time. Now, it's funny now because we used to hear all these stories from the OOG A-State fans who were there the first time the convo was built. And they could tell you, hey, this was 8,000 strong every single time in the 90s. It's like,
I was there.
Yes, I was there, Mike. But still seeing it now and just understanding what ridiculous amount of work it took from the coaches involved and the players involved. I'm just happy this group is getting their flowers, like the likes of Isaiah Nelson, who was here a couple years ago, where you'd have home games, and if I got done shooting the game, I could have a hand count of how many people were there. And now it's legit 6,000. You've got games on national television. It's a testament to guys like him, and not just him. Go back last year to Caleb Fields, the most super of super seniors, him kind of getting his flowers at the end of getting big crowds going to games and having winning basketball. It's been fascinating to kind of see this revival. I guess you could call it a revival of Red Wolves basketball.
Yeah, I think you're right. It's a different era, Chris. I mean, back in the 90s when I was at Arkansas State, you couldn't see every game you wanted on ESPN Plus. You had to be there. You couldn't see it on the news or anywhere because the only place you can catch A-State basketball was in person. So yeah, it was just a different era. And this era does seem to not only be different for that regard, but also for the quality of play. We've been talking about crowds. We've been talking about the way that they react. I would like to get your professional opinion on something that I've been muddling around. Is Northeast Arkansas a basketball crowd or is it a football crowd?
It's basketball.
I thought so. Yes,
it is.
I love the hoops.
Because, and it's just generationally. This has nothing to do with what the success A-State football has had in the 80s. No, in the 80s and especially the 2010s, and then obviously the run they're kind of under Butch Jones. Basketball has been so ingrained in this area since I would say the 1950s, where football, yes, you obviously had those A-State teams that were ridiculously good. The run in the 60s, the national title team in the late 60s. But the one kind of consistent has been basketball. And it kind of started in high school, where the fact I told people this is before Hodson showed up. The Northeast Arkansas Invitational Tournament, a high school tournament.
Yeah.
You would have bigger crowds in the semifinals and the championship game than you would have at A-State men's and women's basketball games, especially if you had the right matchup and you had the right star player. Like, you'd have Austin Reeves games at Cedar Ridge, and you would have a legitimate 6,000 people come and watch that man. You would have Avery Phelps would probably tell you this when he played at Westside in NEA tournament games. Several thousand people coming to watch them play, and so you've had this high school, this basketball atmosphere. Perfect example, KAIT. We're the only high school. We have the only high school basketball show in the state because we're in the one part of the state where people care the most about basketball. From top to bottom, from your Jonesboroughs all the way down to Crowley's Ridge Academy, from 6A all to 1A, you have a consistent love and care and want to of basketball. And now you're kind of seeing it. Now, when Brian Hodson came here, he knew it. He figured out very quickly this area likes basketball. So if you put a team on the floor, one that's appealing to the eyes and can win games and can contend for conference championships, that's the secret sauce to get people to come to games. Like you kind of brought up in one of your posts and what you've said, like wait and see approach. A-State is the ultimate wait and see fan base. They want proof of concept before they're going to shell out their money to go see games.
That's a good way.
I get it. It's kind of weird to say that because you're so used to seeing other fan bases like the biggest ones. Well, we're going to go regardless.
Yeah.
A-State's more of a measured wait and see. It's not for everybody, but it makes sense.
Yeah, and I think Coach Hodgson did a really good move by looking for some really good local talent to come to Arkansas State. Now, Bolano tried to do the same thing. You know, he brings back a couple local legends, and it was cool. I think that did help people kind of get excited about Arkansas State again. But to get these guys that we have now that not only are from Arkansas, whether it's Morrilton or Paragould or all these other places, but also perform at a high level. That's something that Hodgins has done that other coaches just haven't done. And I think that's really cool. Last thing about basketball, Chris, I got to know, are you excited about the stripe out?
I just hope it works. I'm not being a pessimist.
I am.
I hope this works. Give full credit for A-State for kind of going more into marketing, especially with basketball, because that was the one thing that was like, you would see it marketed every once in a while. Okay, if a rivalry game's coming, but now to see the consistent approach to market every single home game, tip of the cap to Jeff Puritan and all the folks behind the scenes there, because that was kind of the one, like, it's not the elephant in the room. It's like, it's right there in the face. Like, if y'all figure out a way to market this successfully, you're going to get people to show up regardless, because, hey, folks want free stuff. At the end of the day, folks want free stuff.
Hell yeah, we do.
And hey, if you get free stuff and you can see a team win in your backyard, hey, that's a double bonus. But just the fact, hey, they're even trying this is proof that there's so much optimism and success with the program. Nothing like this would have been tried 5 years ago. Because if you would have said stripe out, it would have been stripe out of seats and a couple people.
Now we would have the personnel to fill the seats.
Now you got the personnel to fill the seats, and a whole lot of ticket campaigns. I think I just saw one that they're doing like 2 upper level tickets for $12. Just that sort of aggressive marketing. I'm just happy that a lot of these, especially these experienced guys that have been on the team, like Avery Felts, who's been on this team for 4 or 5 years, who's seen when it was dozens of people in the crowd. He's going to walk out First National Bank Arena like Thursday night, and it's going to be a legitimate 6,000-7,000 people, and that's awesome because that entire program deserves it for the amount of work they've had to do to turn things around. Where, they were in Joe Lunardi's bracketology for months at a time. I was like, I'm just not used to seeing that much attention for Arkansas State basketball, but it's great.
Yeah. So the reason why these type of promos, they don't concern me, but I feel like
I just want a shirt.
Yeah,
I just want a stripe out shirt.
Well, you get a shirt too, and that's nice. It has the hard hat on it. It's kind of cool. But a lot of times there are things that Arkansas State tries to do that I get behind. Like, remember the push to make Ring of Fire the official song of Arkansas State, and we would sing it like in the third quarter of football games?
Yeah, I was like,
I was all in.
I liked the concept, but it was
Me too.
This is going to go over so many college-age kids. This is not going to work. Now, I'm one of the few people that Raised by the Wolves, the entrance song for football, I was like, that is an absolutely perfect song for them to come out. It's not for everyone. Granted, I'm almost 40, but I'm still enough. I'm still enough into the how do you do kids of hip hop and music. So I was like, I can kind of get to that song because it's a perfect. I would have said, like, for me personally, the fourth quarter song should have been "Howling for You" by the Black Keys. It's a perfect song, and it's enough of a catchy, upbeat song to go into the fourth quarter.
There's a sing along moment with it too.
There's a sing along moment.
No. People like that. That's Ring of Fire doesn't have that. I understood Ring of Fire.
It's just droning and sad-ish.
It is
sad-ish.
Yeah. See,
it's a great song. It's awesome because it was the Johnny Cash connection, but it's the saddest song.
Well, there's an apocalyptic feel to it. I thought that kind of was in step with Arkansas State fans, but I was totally wrong about that. All right, well, good luck with the stripe out for us then, because I'm hoping the stripe out works. Usually stuff like that I just sort of repel, but I'm excited about these shirts. I'm excited about the crowd that we expect. And Chris Hutchinson, as always, I'm excited about the coverage you're going to provide. And I want to thank you for coming on the show.
Thank you. No problem. Good to chop it up and talk some A-State stuff and such and everything in between, because that's just how we've been wired for so many years.
And if you see Chris lugging his camera around, lugging all of his equipment, offer to help him to his car because he's walking a long-ass way, I guarantee it.
But that's my exercise because I don't go to the gym.
All right, we'll see you later, Chris. You know, I joke when I see Chris. I see Chris a lot, like after football games, for example. We all meet at the press conference area after games, talk to coach and some of the players. And, you get this idea that sports media personalities like Chris or, I don't know, Steve Sullivan from Little Rock, like they have this crew with them. Like they got a guy and a producer and a cameraman and maybe somebody holds up a boom mic. They don't have that. These guys are one-man shows. They're lugging their equipment. They're doing the setup. They're doing the sound checks. They're arranging interviews. They're writing their scripts on the fly. I used to be critical of Hutchinson's. He kind of alluded to it, not my criticism, but said he had made some errors. I don't know if he made any errors early in his career covering Arkansas State, but I was always a little critical that he was covering Northwest Arkansas a little bit too much. I came to understand how hard that job is, how hard the job is to be a sports media personality in Northeast Arkansas. There are a lot of mouths to feed. And Chris has managed to do it better than anybody else. And we talked about the media community in Northeast Arkansas that covers Arkansas State and the university, and it's robust. There are some good guys there. Whether it's Kara Ritchie or JC or anyone out there that gets out there every day and adds a little coverage to Arkansas State, it's great. And Hutchinson and his buddy Charles McCary, they're two of the best. I love those guys. I'm glad they was able to come onto the show. I want to close the show with something else I wrote about on howlraiser.com. By the way, howlraiser.com, free to anybody. I don't make money off Howlraiser, except for the ads. But on howlraiser.com, I talked a little bit about women's basketball at Arkansas State. I kind of made a confession. Women's basketball let me down last year. They did. I was all in on Destiny Rogers. I was all in on Izzy Higginbottom. I was all in on Lauren Pendleton. I was all in on this wave of new talent that Rogers and her staff had brought in. Beginning of the season looked pretty good. I think they closed out the season. I think the Red Wolves closed out the season with 7 straight losses. Now, it wasn't a lot. It wasn't, there were some circumstances involved that just couldn't be helped. Higginbottom was hurt for much of that year. And man, let me tell you something. Izzy Higginbottom was like much must-watch TV. I watched more Red Wolves women's basketball games than I ever had my whole life because of Izzy Higginbottom. She and Lauren Pendleton together on the court, when they were on the court, were just magic to watch. They were. Izzy left, Pendleton left. I have to admit, I checked out. Now, I shouldn't. I cover Arkansas State sports. I love Arkansas State sports. But I did not have the bandwidth for women's basketball. Not when they're going to lose 7 straight at the end of the season, finish 13-20 or whatever they finished. Yeah. I mean, I know it's unfair, but man, I hold women's basketball to the same standard as I hold any sports program at Arkansas State. You ever hear me talk about baseball? No, I've checked out. Maybe this year under Coach Mike Silva, maybe I'll check back in. But I've checked out of baseball. I don't have the bandwidth. I don't have the time. I'm a dad. I'm a businessman. Destiny Rogers has got me back on that bandwagon. I know it's kind of anybody can be on a bandwagon when you're winning, right? And yeah. Move over. I'm jumping on. 6 straight wins for the women. And let me tell you, this team is different. This team is different from last year. Last year, it was just Higginbottom and Pendleton. And if the opponent had a plan for Higginbottom and Pendleton, then that was it. Game over. There just wasn't enough firepower on the team to overcome any defensive plan that went against Higginbottom and Pendleton. Didn't have any presence underneath the goal, didn't have another 3-point shooter, didn't really have anything. This year, there is not a single double-digit scorer on Arkansas State's team. Not a single one. But man, they are lighting up the hoop. It's because they distribute the ball. I love Chrislyn Rose. I love Winter Rogers, but man, I think my new favorite player has got to be Nisa Sam Grant. She's the 6'4" grad student. She started her career at UAPB. She ended up at UTSA. Now she's with us. And I just love watching her game. She reminds me so much of Zay Nelson, right? Isaiah Nelson. She's tall. She's lanky. You know, she wants to, so she'll make a mistake. She'll make a foul because oftentimes she's just, taller than the other women on the court. She's going to throw those elbows. She's going to reach over the back. She can't help it. But man, she's fun to watch. They're all fun to watch. I love Winter Rogers. It's a good team. Is it good enough to beat James Madison? I don't know. James Madison has a long and storied history for fielding good women's basketball teams. We've fielded good basketball teams before at Arkansas State, but it's been a while. I don't know if this team is going to make a whole lot of waves. They've won 6 straight. They put 100 on Arizona State. That's pretty good. So yeah, I'm back on the bandwagon. I'm back on the bandwagon for Arkansas State women's basketball.